Thanks for having us up here and the opportunity. I was saying before, this is nearly a bit of coming out for GPSA. It's probably the first speech I've given on sustainability, even though we've done a lot of work on it in the background. So pleased to get the opportunity, and firstly, well done to Roger, your years of service, and to those others who are in community service, looking after the environment and doing it for the good of the community. Congratulations on that work. I also chair the Sustainability Task Force for GPSA also, so this is why there was no way of me getting out of this one today. So this is who we are. So we represent 4,500 grain growers in South Australia, about 1,500 members. For those of you who aren't members yet, please. Obviously, we recipient of the PIF fee that you pay per tonne of grain. We plant more than 4 million hectares of cereals, pulses and oilseeds annually, you'd be aware of. GPSA develops and implements policies, projects that will promote the economic, environment, sustainability of grain businesses. So we're advocacy, not research. GPSA advocates for SA grain producers related issues beyond the farm gate. Leadership, we engage in industry stakeholders regarding policies we believe will promote the economic and environmental sustainability. And we inform grain producers on matters of importance to their business, obviously. We also sit on the national bodies as well to inform up, obviously, through GPA, less so with GGL. To outline, we need to feed 10 billion people by 2050. Global warming is to limit that to 1.5 degrees Celsius before the peak of 2025. We must reduce it by 43% below 2005 levels by 2030. That's what the science is telling us. Australian government emissions targets. This is the government's targets. 43% below 2005 by 2030, net zero by 2050, and that was espoused at the United Nations 2022. You would have been aware of. Industry and supply chain targets. National Farmers Federation have said the economy-wide global net zero by 2050, and various supply chain actor targets also. Risks, market access. Will we get market access without being involved in this space? Supply chain requirements, capital raising and your banking requirements. You'll be starting to hear that now as you're talking to these people, starting to feed back in the interviews you're having across the table. Opportunities though, premium markets, biodiversity markets, co-benefits of carbon sequestration and biodiversity for your soils, which I'm preaching to the converted here. Capital raising and bank requirements, opportunities with green loans and the such. Background to the issue. These are the people that are demanding it on the other side of our businesses. Unilever, Cargill, Kellogg's, JBS, Nestle, massive companies with really aggressive ESG targets. Viterra, we meet with Viterra once every 6 weeks on this exact subject. They're going clean and green. Even Bayer, there you go, imagine. Carbon footprint, industry examples of the metrics you're starting to hear around the place and would be aware of most of these. The MLA Sheep Sustainability Framework, Australian Beef Framework, the MLA Carbon Neutral by 2030, and for grains, it's the Grain Growers Sustainability work or GGL Sustainability Metrics. A lot of work being done on it. It's not quite out yet, but yeah, lucky enough to sit on that panel as well. Understanding Scope 1, 2 and 3 and why it's such an issue for grains. We're Scope 3 for a lot of people, just to be clear. So upstream pre-farm is Scope 3, emissions from production, purchased inputs, e.g. fertiliser, animal feed and chemicals. Grain growers. Scope 2, operation on farm, and then downstream post-farm. Carbon footprint of grain production. So there's the inventory of greenhouse gas emissions. This is, again, is getting more into the emission side. I know we talk a lot about carbon. Livestock tends to talk a lot about carbon. For grains, it's emissions. We can't do a lot about carbon. We actually use carbon, or we try and maintain our carbon levels. But that's the fertiliser is the big one. It's nitrous oxides and carbon dioxides, and that stands out, doesn't it? So canola, obviously a very high one. Why? Low yield, takes nitrogen. Wheat, not too bad considering, but it's high yielding, very good plant, so pretty efficient. And then of course we got the benefit in South Australia certainly of being able to grow grain legumes. Note how low diesel is. All the chat about dirty diesel, all the talk about changing our tractors over to hydrogen. 7% of the problem. Sorry, let's go back. It's funny how we get caught up. This is why we need to lead as far as industry compared to really poor government policy. It's about emissions, carbon dioxide, green urea. How cool would that be? Drop that by 20%. Measurement challenges exist in existing tools. So to measure greenhouse gas emissions in grain and sheep production, Greenhouse Accounting Framework, or GGAF. It's consistent with the National Grower two ways accounting method currently. It's accessible, widely used, being pushed by everybody at the moment actually. It's not very comprehensive. Cool Farm tool, used a lot overseas. You hear a lot about that. The interesting part about the Cool Farm tool, unfortunately, its results don't match up very well with GGAF or FarmPrint. FarmGas, FarmPrint, and APSIM model obviously is the most rigorous model to date. Measuring carbon sequestration, so that's greenhouse gas emissions. For carbon, it's the CSIRO Look-See tool. You can go find it, you can use it. Same as the greenhouse gas one, you can get on, use them now pretty easily. Full camp model, it's probably the next one now. So these are tools that are available now. You can start to get a handle on your carbon emissions. Measuring our emissions. Our footprint GGAF model, an Ag Excellence Carbon Accounting Workshop, and that's the website to get on and have a look at that one. That's what it looks like. So wheat currently in the mid-north is 0.18 tonnes per tonne of wheat produced on the world scale. That's very good. Pulse is less, and canola 0.55. You'll often see that as a kilogram metric as well, so that does confuse a little bit, but there's a lot of really good stuff here as far as Australian grain growers. And then the difference is the different scopes: fertiliser scope 1, crop residues scope 1, and the other is scope 1 and 3. So benchmarking. We did this in the Mid-North as a group. The Mid-North, low emissions intensity on a national global scale. The workshop averaged 190 kilograms per there we go. All of a sudden we've gone back to kilograms rather than 0.19 kilogram of carbon dioxide emitted per tonne. The beauty of that was the grain and legumes we grow. The nitrogen use efficiency, so we put nitrogen down in wintertime. We don't put it out in mild conditions like they do in the northern states. So baseline benchmarking difficulties were the problem. There are some difficulties with it. The beauty, if you are going to do it, just be happy doing it as an average. Don't pick the highest year, the lowest year. Just rough enough's okay to get an idea how, pick an average year to get just see how you sit amongst the world scale. And this is where we sit on the world scale. It's a really bad graph because T2 emissions are accounted for differently in Australia, but it gives you a rough idea where we're currently sitting against our exporters without trying yet, of course. So I'm not sure how you can see, but there's Australia here.
India's just the last one.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, we're okay. So we're in amongst Australia. This is where we sit. So the Mallee sits here. Here. So yeah, why that would be probably the production a little bit, the height, the yield, maybe lack of legumes. I'm not quite sure why that, but it's still not a bad number when you consider the world scale. So we have got a really good story to tell. Risks. Climate change impacts on yield, climate, and the climate futures tool. So getting that right, getting the tools right so we actually know how to pivot. Carbon pricing is an opportunity if we are at low emissions. So we need to be low emissions. So once we know, we can sell it. Carbon border adjustment scheme, carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, is coming. People are going to start measuring emission food into their home states. That's the US. Europe currently aren't talking about it, but why won't their farms demand it? There's going to be a carbon adjustment mechanism on the border for Australian grain. It will come, so we do need to measure. Supply chain requirements, our supply chain want it. They're coming hard and fast at us. They don't know what they want yet, but they are talking about us. They need it. They want it. They need to service their ESG requirements. Banks and raising capital, you're gonna need it for your banks. We've met with the 4 largest banks. They all flew into South Australia to meet us. All their top agri lenders flew in from all around the state just to meet with us to try and get an idea on how to do it. They are spending millions in the background with the CSIRO to work out how to measure it and how to push it back to farm and how to make us do it. So it's going to be needed. You're going to have to do some reporting to banks on future capital of your soils. I think this was touched on before. If you're below 600 mil rainfall, it's very difficult to increase your soil organic carbon. Continue to measure our OC levels. So we need baseline data and we need to work out how that is. Opportunities on less productive land. So let's look at what we're doing with our land. And again, it was measured before. How do we suit the environment to the best production for that land as far as emissions go and carbon storage? And we've got to be reducing emissions. So CSIRO, GRDC, Australian Baseline Mitigation Assessment, which is out now. We would argue it's a flawed piece of work. There you go, that's controversy for you. Green fertiliser, nitrogen management, controlled traffic rotations are the biggest things we can do for best practice greenhouse gas emissions. It's about all else we can do. A lot of us are doing this really well anyway, so some of it's just verifying what we're doing. Green fertiliser, I'm sure you know what it means, but if we could produce local fertiliser supply of nitrogen, that would be the big one. The green coating, for us, it's probably not a big one, but it certainly would be a tick in the right direction because we actually don't volatilise much N, but still we'd take it if we could get it. Localised decision making, which is the problem with the CSIRO model and GRDC model at the moment. It's not very granular. So it doesn't, for instance, in the lower north of South Australia, it doesn't recognise we grow grain legumes. It gives us a rotation of wheat, barley. Don't know anyone that does that. So it doesn't particularly model the little bit of pivots we can do as farmer on the local level, and we see that as a real issue. So if we're going to get down to the grower level, making change across the country, we need that data to show the different impacts of what we're actually doing. It doesn't do that particularly well at the moment, and we're getting a fair bit of pushback from GRDC about it. That's okay. It makes for a nice conversation. Likely increases in SOCs, high clay content, high fertile soils, high porosity, mean rainfall above 600 mil. You can do some stuff that obviously seasonal climate, consistent rainfall, average conditions, moderate temperatures. You can build carbon. Baseline SOC stocks are low, so that gives you, if you a poor piece of land, you can obviously raise up and do something about it. Management history, again, changing history, changing what we do in the future, all builds to an opportunity for likely increasing. Hard to do, low clay content, low ability to change your organic carbon, and getting into the soils over here, so I'll stay out of that. You get better speakers coming. Below 600 mil per year, you can't grow forests, so the opportunity cost of carbon is very low, so we should be growing grain. That's what that's telling us. Increased volatility, extreme weather events, fire, obviously. Then high relative potential to storage carbon capacity, low inputs of biomass, high removals of biomass, low levels of soil disturbance from tillage, good soil nutrient and soil chemical management, and initial conditions which help. That's a quick one to have a quick look at, but that does just show the ability of what different things can do. What the rainfall just shows you over here, how quickly you can do something about your organic carbon levels. Agriculture, cropping doesn't change much, doesn't shift much, even the best practice. And pasture's got obviously some opportunities for livestock, but again, not in my purview here today. Just put that one up there, so it's just a really good, well, it's actually not a really good map, it's a very broad map of South Australia and the ability, different areas that you can just check online, again, using the data environment, sa.gov. So again, just some information for you to check out where you are on the map or where you'd like to pivot to for the ability to store carbon, sequestration, or forestry, obviously. Opportunities. Ease of verification and traceability is where we need to get to. Carbon neutral, can we do it? So climate active, carbon neutral standard, extremely rigorous and difficult to achieve to be carbon neutral. Currently, there is no market premiums and very difficult to achieve given the homogeneous nature of grain. No one is currently trading carbon neutral in Australia successfully at the moment or selling it. Opportunities, government grants, PIRSA growing carbon footprint pilot, carbon plus diversity pilot, Australia Farm biodiversity certification scheme, and the biodiversity trading platform in the ecosystems area. So things out there we can start doing. ISC accreditations, currently ISCC, canola, you would know, that's broadened into barley, it's broadening into grain legumes. It's the only one that's internationally recognised at this stage for grains. ISC silver equals the FSA tool, probably the optimum in the world at the moment. Others is Farm Sustainability Assessment Tool, that's the FSA, and by Sustainable Agriculture, the initiative, the SAI group. So that's the accreditations we're currently running under, and that's what we need to do to sell grain into Europe. Europe want it. We have to, it's big place, Europe. That's what they want. That's what we need to be meeting as a minimum base at this stage. So this is the task force so far. This is what we're doing on your behalf. The GPSA task force in 2021 aims to provide recommendations to the GPSA board on matters concerning the development of SA grains industry, made up of GPSA directors, GRDC representatives, and National Grain Body representatives. Also have a couple of soil experts on that, obviously, and Viterra sit on that, and then whoever else we want to get in. Everyone is pretty keen to get their word at that meeting. It's really cool. 3 meetings have been held covering so far state and national perspectives on sustainability, grain sustainability framework, the GGL tool, soil carbon experts, sustainability drivers, buyers, consumers of SA grain, sustainability drivers of capital providers. So all 4 major banks flew in and met at that meeting. What to do now? How to baseline. It's the biggest problem. We don't know how to baseline our data, and it's the biggest thing that came through. I don't know who was at Evocag, but we still don't know how to measure our soils at 30 centimetres, get it adapted, how much, how wide, how verified do we need to do it. We still can't agree on that, and it just staggers me, like how we can't get. So we don't know our baseline data, and we also can't agree on a reasonable tool to measure our emissions. Currently, we're running the Mudland Group Farm Print tool through through the back of AgWorld, which looks really cool at the moment, but that's sat on the shelf for 18 months between the CSIRO and GRDC while they tried to commercialise it. So your money through the CSIRO and GRDC let this sit on the shelf, stagnant. It's just insulting. Anyway, so we still don't know how to get this measurement out, and if you talk to Farm and Mullen Group are trying to roll it out, they're as frustrated as the rest of us. So until we can get that baseline data, it's really hard to know how we move forward, because obviously the issue of additionality. So we've moved too quick. You've already moved. You haven't got your baseline data. No one cares what you did before. So it's really stopping. This is why grains is a step behind every other industry at the moment. There's a reason why the science isn't there yet. What do we need to measure? So what else do we need to measure? So that's what we're grappling with. Obviously, organic carbon and emissions, but what else? It's a big world. Chemical use, labour, deforestation, all the stuff that's in the ISC currently, and what else do we need to do? How do we resource our growers' preparedness? How do we get boots on the ground that tells us how to do it? How do we make it easy for growers? How do we get it to be one input verification method for growers? So you enter your spray data with your weather data into it. How does that feed straight through to an emissions output? Why should you have to touch it twice? Everyone else in the supply chain wants that information. Why is the grower going to be the one that's going to copy it at the cost, or having to do all the work that feeds it up for maybe just an market access for everybody in that supply chain? That's our risk. That's why we need to be across it. Lobby for harmonised and national leadership in auditing. Wow. I probably should just leave that there as a comment because that is infuriating. But national leadership in auditing, national leadership on this is pathetic at the moment through GGL and GPA. They need to get their act into gear. We need a single voice on this, and it needs to be harmonised. You can tell I'm only chair for another 6 months, so I can say this stuff and walk out the door. Poor old John Gladigo's got to carry this through. But it is an issue for you, and as growers, you really should be pushing back. It's rubbish. And we need to get the auditing right. And the auditing, I would love to sit with Grain Growers Limited. I think it really needs to be industry-led auditing so that we're protecting grain growers' rights whilst getting the auditing really right on behalf of grain growers. You wouldn't want it audited by the government. You know, we'd love to see it industry-led and emissions, and yeah, we'd love to be working in amongst it rather than being told what to do. And I think that's really important as far as grains go. That's where we are as GPSA. That's where we see the climate. That's why we think it's coming. This is real for agriculture, real for grains, and that's probably that's why you haven't heard about it much before. Obviously, we're still working in the background to get the metrics right. But thanks for the opportunity today, and yeah, hope that gave you some comfort that we are working on your behalf to get across this issue. Thank you.